The cargo bay smelled of damp fur, chalk powder, and something faintly metallic that Mara Ellison had never managed to identify. It came from the cubs themselves, some gland secretion, her supervisor had explained on her first day, and after 4 months aboard the Varatha's Rest, she'd stopped noticing it. What she noticed instead were the coats. 6 of them. Hung the night before on 6 small hooks, each one labeled with a name she had learned to pronounce with reasonable accuracy: Joe, me, New York, Di, Hi, and Wa. They were insulated parkas, human-designed, human-sewn, ordered from a catalog on Mara's recommendation, because the cubs were being transported through a cold transit corridor, and the species advisor had confirmed that the Veyrath young were sensitive to temperature drops below 12 degrees Celsius. The coats had buttons. This, she would later reflect, was where she had made her one and only mistake. Cale Vera arrived first to the cargo bay, as he always did. He was the eldest of the group, which meant he was 14 months old and therefore, in his own assessment, supremely competent. He was the size of a large domestic dog, built along the lines of a snow leopard crossed with something that had decided to grow thumbs out of evolutionary stubbornness. His coat was gray with dark rosette patterns. His eyes were amber. He regarded everything Mara did with the particular expression of a child who is certain the adult is doing it wrong. He picked up Joe's coat instead of his own. Nobody could have predicted this. Nobody could have stopped it. Cale, Mara said from the doorway, datapad in hand. That's Joe's. The hooks are confusing, said Cale. His translator caller rendered his vocalizations in flat, precise standard, which somehow made everything he said sound more reasonable than it was. The names are on the hooks. The names are small. Mara opened her mouth. Closed it. Cale was already attempting to button Joe's coat around himself, which meant he was threading the left button through the right hole, and also that Joe, who had just wandered in behind him, was now holding the sleeve and trying to figure out where the coat went, and the answer was apparently sideways. The others arrived in a clump, as cubs tended to do. Me and New York were always together. They were the youngest and had not yet developed the confidence to enter rooms independently. Di followed with the careful, deliberate step of a cub who had recently broken something and was still processing the lesson. Hi came in backwards, which was simply a thing Hi did. Wa arrived last, sat down in the center of the room, and announced that she was ready. None of them reached for their own coats. Mara watched, with the particular stillness of someone who has calculated that intervention will make things worse, as the next 4 minutes unfolded. Me picked up New York's coat. New York, reasoning that if Me had a coat then the remaining coat was hers, picked up the next one in line, which belonged to Di. Di found a coat already on the floor. Cale had dropped Joe's coat momentarily to investigate a button that had rolled away, and put it on. It was Hi's. Hi, discovering no coat remained for her, walked calmly to Wa and began attempting to insert Wa's arm into a sleeve that was already occupied by Wa's other arm. Wa did not protest this. She seemed to consider it a reasonable development. Joe had been holding Cale's coat for 3 minutes, turning it over slowly, examining it with the concentrated attention of a cub who believes that observation at sufficient length will yield comprehension. It had not. He put it on his head. Joe, said Mara. It doesn't open, said Joe. It opens at the front. Those are buttons. What do buttons do? Mara set her datapad on a crate. She crossed the room. She crouched down. She'd learned early that talking down to a Veyrath cub was both physically and socially unwise, and she said, very carefully, buttons go through the holes. See? The button. Through the hole. And then the coat stays closed. Joe watched her demonstrate on the wrong coat, Cale's, which Joe was still wearing as a hat. Why doesn't it use magnets? Asked Joe. Some coats use magnets. These ones use buttons. Why? Because I ordered them 3 weeks ago and didn't think to specify. This was, in Mara's private assessment, the most honest thing she had said all morning. Cale had by now successfully buttoned Joe's coat around himself and, through an architectural improbability that Mara would spend several minutes trying to reconstruct later, also around me. The two of them stood fastened together at the middle, me's right side attached to Cale's left, both attempting to walk in different directions with the solemn focus of two creatures who refuse to acknowledge that this is their fault. "You're connected," said Mara. "I know," said Cale. "Does that bother you?" Cale considered this. "Me smells like chalk." "I know," said me, aggrieved. "That doesn't answer my question," said Mara. "We can share a coat," said Cale. "It's efficient." Mara stood up. She pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. She breathed slowly, the way her old mentor had taught her, 3 counts in, 4 counts out, do not laugh, they will think you are threatening them, and then she said, "Nobody is sharing a coat. Everyone needs their own coat. The corridor is -4 and I am responsible for all 6 of you arriving with all your extremities." Silence. Then Hai, from inside what was technically was coat and also partly said, "What is an extremity?" It took 19 minutes. Later, Mara would not tell this story as a failure. She had been on 3 postings before the Varatha's Rest, 1 diplomatic station, 1 research vessel, 1 transit hub that had nearly broken her, and she had learned that the measure of a caretaker was not whether chaos happened, but what you did inside it. What she did was this. She started with Wen Hai, because they were the most tangled and also the most good-natured. She talked them through it like a puzzle, which they responded to well, because Vairath cubs liked puzzles and disliked being told they'd done something wrong. Where does this arm go? Let's find out together. Hai emerged from the coat situation with the quiet triumph of someone who had solved something, which was accurate. She sorted me in New York by trading coats between them in sequence, a shell game logic that me found fascinating and wanted to repeat, which Mara declined. She detached Cale and me with the focused care of a field medic, unbuttoning the shared coat a single button at a time while Cale narrated each button's removal with the gravity of a ship's log entry. She retrieved Joe's coat from Joe's head, held it open, and said "arms in," and Joe complied with such immediate willingness that Mara felt briefly, irrationally guilty for all 19 minutes. Dai had been wearing Hai's coat the whole time and had not mentioned it. The coat fit, more or less. Mara let it go. They walked the corridor in a line, 6 small furred bodies in, mostly, correct coats, breath fogging in the cold transit air. Cale walked at the front, which he always did. Wa walked at the back, which she always did. In between, me and New York stayed close, and Dai walked with the careful step of someone choosing not to repeat past mistakes, and Hai moved with the bounding rhythm of a creature for whom all forward motion is joyful. Joe walked beside Mara. He had been doing this for about 3 weeks now, showing up at her elbow at moments of transition, not saying anything, simply being present with the comfortable solemnity of a cub who has decided you are trustworthy. "Mara," he said. "Yeah?" The buttons were hard. They were. "You did it though." Joe considered this. "You helped. That's what I'm here for." "Why?" It was the question she'd been asked at every posting, in every language, in every species' particular pitch of genuine bewilderment. Why does a human do this? Why does a human stay? Why would something soft and slow and without claws choose, freely, to be here, in the cold corridor, solving the button problem? Mara thought about all the answers she'd given over the years. She thought about the honest ones, the diplomatic ones, the short ones she gave when she was tired. She settled on the truest. "Because somebody has to know which coat belongs to who," she said. "And apparently that's me." Joe thought about this for the rest of the corridor. At the end, when the door cycled open and warm air rolled out to meet them, he said, "You remembered all 6. "I did." "That's impressive," said Joe. Mara Ellison smiled. She held the door open for 6 cubs in 6 coats, 5 of them correct, and said nothing, because sometimes the best version of humanity, F. C.K. Yeah, looks exactly like this, small, quiet, cold-fingered, and entirely unwilling to let anyone face a button alone.